So why did you go to the Innovations Club if you didn't have an idea?
So it's a funny thing, because when I told my professor in which I was doing my PhD that I was going to this entrepreneurship club, and he looked at me and he said, "But what idea do you have for a startup?" And I said, I have none, but I want to learn more about startups. I want to learn what entrepreneurship is.
From the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, this is The View from Mount Scopus. I'm your host, Gilad Halpern. In this episode, Startup Campus, we explore what it means for a university to manufacture entrepreneurship. How does an academic institution cultivate not only ideas, but the people and processes to turn those ideas into impact in the real world? Today, we'll hear how Israel's Hebrew University, long a powerhouse of basic research, is actively fostering innovators and startups from within its walls. We'll visit the institution's past and present, from one of the world's first technology transfer companies to new programs that teach students to think like entrepreneurs. We'll meet a veteran professor entrepreneur who bridged lab and marketplace, and two young scientists who took their lab idea and tried to build a company around it. It's a journey into the shifting culture inside the university, where the mantra was once publish or perish, and is now expanding to something more. Our story begins in 1964, when the Hebrew University took a bold step. Israel today is known as the startup nation, but back in the 1960s, that future was barely on the horizon. Yet the Hebrew University founded Yisum, a technology transfer company, one of the very first of its kind anywhere. I asked Gadi Paran, Yisum's director of marketing, how the company translates academic ideas into real-world impact.
You do that by accompanying the researchers, starting from the first spark of idea to registering the patent, to commercializing it, and to connecting it to the real world through either licensing or through the creation of spin-offs, working either with industry partners or with investors or entrepreneurs.
Yisum is one of the oldest such companies in the world. What can you tell us about its origins?
In the 1960s, as you know, the idea of commercializing academic research was only just beginning worldwide. Almost nobody was talking about translating university discoveries into real products or companies. And Yisum, as far as I know, was the third one to be established worldwide. And at this point, you have to give credit to the Hebrew University that saw what was coming. And so Yisum was created with three pioneering goals: to protect the university's researchers' intellectual property, to bring discoveries to the marketplace, and to build a bridge between researchers and industry. And as you know, at the time, there was no textbook, there was no modern model to follow, and Yisum essentially had to invent the field from scratch, developing patent systems, designing disclosure processes, and creating some of Israel's first academia-industry collaborations. Those early foundations helped shape what eventually became the Israeli innovation economy.
Yisum began translating academic inventions into things the world could use. One early success was surprisingly down to earth.
I'm going back to the cherry tomato of the 1980s, one of the first products that went from local to global. And this is a great example from this period, developed by Professor Chaim Rabinovich and Professor Nahum Kedar from the Faculty of Agriculture. Yisum licensed the technology in the late 80s, starting from Israeli seed companies and later on to companies around the world, and it became a global agricultural phenomenon.
Yisum was decades ahead of its time. But Yisum isn't just about the big exits or famous inventions. It was a new model for how a university could actively engage with industry. Yisum started long before Israel became known for startups, long before terms like tech transfer were common. That foresight meant the Hebrew University's ideas were finding real-world paths pretty early on. How did Yisum find itself amid the startup nation, the turning of Israel as of the 1990s into a powerhouse of innovation and technology?
This was indeed a period of rapid growth as far as tech transfer companies in licensing, in IP strategy, research partnerships, and venture creation. And one of the maybe most known examples of that period is Mobileye, a company that was built on a computer vision research led by Professor Amnon Shashua. And it began almost independently in the late 90s. And in 2004, Yisum assigned the rights to the know-how, essentially formalizing the commercialization framework of this company that went public first, and in 2017 was acquired by Intel for some $15.3 billion, one of the most famous acquisitions then and since then.
How do you see Yisum's vision developing over the years? From the 1960s to the 2020s, the world of technology is very different. How does Yisum find itself amid that?
Yisum went from protecting intellectual property rights into becoming much more proactive, more global and more agile. We expanded our partnerships and multinational companies, deepened our work to biotech, to nanomedicine, to material science and agri-tech, and strengthened our commitment to creating new ventures.
What would you say is Yisum's main focus right now?
Well, Yisum today is much more than a tech transfer company. It started as a company focused on protecting the intellectual property of researchers, and today is much more than that. It is actually a home for researchers, for innovators, entrepreneurs, industry partners, and investors. And we are working to make sure they are all feel at home and coming to meet us in order to move ideas into reality.
In short, Yisum has become an incubator and nexus, not just filing patents and licensing them out, but bridging people together to launch ventures. At any given time, Yisum is handling hundreds of projects, a portfolio of groundbreaking technologies and spin-off companies, all stemming from the Hebrew University's labs. For decades, though, Yisum focused on channeling faculty inventions outward. What about the broader university community, students, postdocs, the campus culture itself? By the late 2010s, Israel's leaders saw that the national startup engine was losing a bit of steam, and they looked to academia for answers.
The view from Mount Scopus is made possible by American Friends of the Hebrew University. Established in 1925, AFHU has provided over a century of partnership and support to Israel's leading institution of higher learning. To learn more, visit afhu.org.
In 2018, the Israeli Council for Higher Education decided to inject new startup energy directly into campuses. They launched a nationwide program to establish innovation centers at universities. The Hebrew University answered that call by creating the Asper Huger Innovate Center, essentially the university's internal innovation hub and startup accelerator. Dr. Amnon Dekel was brought in to lead the new center. He had a clear mandate: strengthen the bridge between academia and industry, and ignite an entrepreneurial spark among students and researchers alike.
So the center started as part of actually a national process in 2018, where the Council for Higher Education understood that the Israel startup nation was starting to slow down and hit a plateau, and the amount of startups that were created in Israel actually stopped growing and actually started going down. An important question was, how can we strengthen the continuation of Israel being a startup nation and being an innovative place where great startups are created? And one of the answers, and not the only answers, but one of the answers was that they need to strengthen the relationship between academia and industry. And as part of that, they created a competitive call for the creation of entrepreneurship centers in higher education. All the universities in Israel, most of the colleges in Israel competed in this. And I was called on board by the Hebrew University to compete in this process.
The mission was ambitious: transform the university environment so that creating a startup becomes a natural extension of academic work. This meant rethinking old assumptions about the ivory tower and its relationship with commerce.
The center does two major things, and we decided this very, very early on. The first thing we do is what you would expect for a Center of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at a university to do, and that, of course, is create new companies, startups, etc., that base themselves on the intellectual property, knowledge, and capabilities that are grown within the university. So that's one thing we do, and that's obvious. The second thing we do, which is sometimes less obvious, but the way we see it is not less important, is to try to get as many of the 25,000 students that spend their time at the Hebrew University every year, to get as many of them to be aware of the coming disruption in the world of work because of the success of technologies over the last decades. And by becoming aware, help them strengthen themselves for their coming careers. So hopefully we want to create alumni at the university that will be what I like to call future-proof, in the sense that when the robots do take over, they'll be the last ones that are going to be let go.
So, yeah, tell me more about this student outreach program at the center. I mean, it's a very nice idea. How do you apply it to practice?
So it's a gigantic idea, and how within this large organization does a small center move the needle in that sense. One of the first things we did when we got the large grant from the Council for Higher Education was say that we need to create some opportunities for learning for our students that are scalable. So we said if we create another really nice frontal course for 80 students every year, it might be great for those 80 students, but the impact at the university is going to be very small. So we decided to spend quite a lot of money that we got in order to develop 3 digital online courses in the format of what we call the MOOC, the Massive Online Open Courseware. And we developed these courses, A, in English, B, with Hebrew and Arabic subtitles. By the way, today there's also Spanish subtitles, and in the future there might be additional languages. And we did that because we wanted these courses to scale to as many students as possible. As of now, we started offering these courses, I think, if I remember correctly, in 2022. So as of now, we've passed the 6,000 students who've taken these courses. Every semester, we have about 850 students in our digital courses. And they have been really, really successful in the sense that there's a waiting list for many students to take them, and the satisfaction level from these courses is really, really high. And I'm happy to say we already have one exit from these courses, because a few students called me up 2 and a bit years ago to say thank you. And I said, okay, thank you. I'm happy that you're calling me up. I teach the first course, Introduction to Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And I said, why are you calling me to say thank you? It's my job to teach. And they said, well, we're calling to say thank you because we studied in the course, we finished our degree, we became alumni at the university, but what we learned in that course really, really helped us in a pragmatic fashion when we raised funding for our company. And since then, they've raised over $40 million. And if the knowledge that I've heard about today is correct, then they're in the middle of an M&A and they're being bought by another company. And that's just from one course. So,
of course, Huger Innovate does more than courses. It runs hackathons, accelerators, mentoring programs, building an ecosystem on campus where budding entrepreneurs can flourish. It's part of a global shift in higher education. As Dr. Deckel notes, rapid technological change is forcing universities to rethink what skills they impart. He and others believe that in the coming era, everyone will have to be an entrepreneur of their own career.
I think we all know that the world is undergoing major changes today because of the success of artificial intelligence. And it's very obvious that we're now in an era where the whole basis for what a university looks like, how it operates, etc., is under question right now. One thing is not under question, and that is, of course, the fact that universities need to be a basic home for basic research at the university, and with what we've been seeing over the last few years, it also has to open up to applied research. From the pedagogical point of view, there are some major questions that are coming up with AI. So with everybody having an AI in their pocket, the question is, how do we teach them? How do we make sure that there's no de-skilling that happens, that in a few years' time, all people will know how to do is basically ask questions to AI and then do what AI tells them? Obviously, that's not what we want to happen. And how do we create people that are able to continue growing as they leave the university, since, as we know, today education does not stop when you graduate. Education, in many ways, continues and starts when you graduate. And that is a major question that not only us at the Hebrew University, but all universities around the world are struggling with today. So we see ourselves as part of this process, and we agree with some of the voices that were being heard around the world today that the future job will be entrepreneurship, that everyone will have to be an entrepreneur in the sense that they identify what they'd like to deal with and then need to do what they need to do in order to make that happen. And as part of that process, we've created what we call the Entrepreneurial Boost Camp. And this is a workshop that we do once a year where students can actually look at themselves as a startup, but not as a business startup, but as a startup that says, what do I want to be when I grow up? What is the product that I want to grow into becoming? And then we help them develop their program and their plan to do that.
This resonates with a deeper cultural shift happening at the Hebrew University and beyond, as academia opens up to innovation. This shift did not happen overnight. To understand it, let's talk to someone who lived through academia's old culture and is helping to shape the new one. Oded Shoseyev is a renowned professor at the Hebrew University's Faculty of Agriculture and a serial inventor. Over his career, he's been involved in more than a dozen startup companies based on his lab's discoveries. But when he started out, none of this was common. As a young scientist, Shoseyev cared mostly about one thing: publishing papers and securing tenure. Back in the early 1990s, Shoseyev made a breakthrough in plant biology and nearly missed turning it into a successful venture. He recalls the story of his first big invention and how a chance encounter changed everything.
Well, I'm essentially a material scientist working in the field of biotechnology. And over the years, my laboratory was responsible for several inventions, some of which already reached the marketplace and became products. Maybe I should start with the first one. Many years ago, we were working on a protein called cellulose binding protein that we discovered is affecting plant growth together with some other proteins and genes that encodes for these proteins. And that consequently became a discovery that ended up in the first transgenic eucalyptus tree that grow faster for the pulp and paper industry. We've been able to show that expressing these cell wall proteins affect the growth rate of the trees. And a company was established based on this technology, Futurogene, about 18 years ago or so. The company was actually sold to today the largest forestry company, pulp and paper company in the world. It's a Brazilian company called Suzano for about $100 million. And that was actually, I would say, my first exit. It was very nice to have it.
Did you know that you were hitting the jackpot there when you developed that?
No, not at all. It's actually a funny story. I was very young, a faculty member when I started to work on these proteins, and one day came a CEO of a company, a U.S. company that I was doing consulting to, and he met me and he asked me, what am I doing in my lab? So I told him that I'm working on proteins that binds to cellulose. which is the main component of the plant cell wall. So he asked me what is it good for. I said, well, I don't know what is it good for, but think about the fact that now you have a protein that specifically binds to cellulose, and cellulose is one of the most important biomaterials on Earth. Almost everything is made of cellulose. My shirt, paper, even the table we are around, it's all made of cellulose. So probably the ability to bind specifically to such an important material may bring some interesting applications. So he asked me, did you file for patent? I said, no, I don't care about patents. I just wrote a very nice paper that was accepted to Proceeding National Academy USA, which it's a very reputable journal, and it's very important. I said, why is it so important? I said, well, because I need to get my tenure. So, publications is the key. So I said, but why not write first the patent and then publish? I said, no, I'm not interested in patents. So from that point, I actually felt that I'm kind of transparent to him. And he was looking for a phone number of ISUM, which is the Technology Transfer Office of the Hebrew University, and he called them just in front of me. He was asking for the CEO. We started to talk to the CEO and said, listen, I'm here with a young scientist from the Faculty of Agriculture that apparently have very interesting discovery, but he never wrote a patent on that, and it's going to be published. So he asked him, well, what do you want from me? He said, well, from you, not too much, but I just would like to propose to this young scientist something. He said, what are you going to propose? He said, I'm going to take his paper before it's being published, because he's just got the galley proof, and I'll send it immediately to my patent lawyers in the US. They will file for a patent on behalf of the Hebrew University, so that's why I need you. But we don't have much time, so I would like to have a fair agreement. And the terms of the agreement are the following. I'm going to give him for 2 years $150,000 for research to do some proof of concepts and see if any of that is doable. And then I'd like to have a fair agreement with you based on royalties. And he said another thing. He said that he's going to give me also equity. I took the phone, and on the other side there was a CEO of ISUM. He said, did you understand what he's saying? I said, most of it. He said, what is the part you didn't understand? I said, I don't know what is equity, but he says he gave it to me, and like 2 minutes ago I had nothing. Now I have like $150,000 for 2 years for research and this equity thing. So I think I'm in a better shape. He said, well, I agree. And the company was actually established. We didn't even sign even on a napkin, any agreement. They really kept the word. And as I said, it was like 12 years later, the company was sold for $100 million, and that was happy ending. And for me, it was also a lesson that what we're doing at the university may have value beyond publishing papers.
That lesson came as a revelation. Joseph had been trained to focus on getting papers in top journals, the coin of the realm in academia. The idea of commercializing his research simply wasn't on the agenda for a young scientist at the time.
In fact, it was the opposite. I mean, the Hebrew University, or most of the universities 35 years ago, there was absolutely no focus on taking the science into the marketplace. In fact, there was, well, still there is this terminology that talks about basic research and applied research. And in fact, Professor Bergman once said years ago, that there is no such a thing, applied research and and basic research. There is good research and bad research, or good science and bad science. I mean, from good science, maybe you can do something out of it. From bad science, probably nothing. In fact, I think also the motivation of particularly young scientists that just got their, they were on a tenure track position, was never to go ahead and try to commercialize their inventions, because they never got any credit for that. If they wanted to get tenure and promoted to become, a professor and so on, the only thing at a time that was discussed when they had to be promoted was the number of the publications and the impact factor. Over the years, that has been changed. I mean, it's still, of course, extremely important to publish papers, and my group, we published so far more than 350 publications. So I'm happy when that happens, but I'm more satisfied to see that what's written in the paper is useful for something, and that is something that these over the last several years, Hebrew University at least completely is working in these lines, that scientists that develop inventions that goes back to the society, that actually support the universities, should get credit for that. And I think it's right.
This marks a sea change in academic culture. 30 years ago, a young professor might even hide any interest in the industry for fear of being seen as less serious. Today, the Hebrew University wants to recognize and reward those who turn research into real-world solutions. Still, how do you cultivate that change in practice?
So I think probably one of the biggest things that happened was the understanding that the process has to be started not from the PIs, from principal investigators, but actually from the students. And in fact, we at the Hebrew University have a wonderful program. It's called Huji Innovate, that is supported by the Asper family, where these programs actually start to teach innovation and to teach entrepreneurship, even in undergraduate studies. And it doesn't cover only, exact sciences or natural science, but all the faculties. Of course, business administration, but humanities and law and everything. So, and I think that this is something that is unique. It actually rhymes much better with the DNA of the students of the university over the last few years, that don't just come to the university to get an engineering degree or law degree, but also to learn how to study and to explore science for the benefits of mankind.
With all the money that you got from commercializing your work, were you not able to just leave the university and set up even a nicer laboratory somewhere privately and not worry about all the things that university professors have to worry about?
Well, I have to say that I heard this question already once, and my clear answer is absolutely no. I mean, there's no way that I will leave the university, or I would leave the university for that, for a simple reason. All the good ideas that I have, all these new breakthroughs that I have, is resulted from discussions with my students. And if I can follow up on what you asked, I mean, I was asked once, why is that? Why not? Why can't you get this out of the university? And I said, because these students think out of the box. And the reason they think out of the box is because they still don't know where the box is. You really have to be very, very young to become a true inventor, because the more we learn, our brain tells us for any question, no, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. This is been tested already. And so this is really the spring of all the ideas, the university, and it has absolutely no replacement.
They don't know where the box is, so they can think outside of it. For Shoseov, that is the magic of the university environment. His lab continues to deploy that magic. He told me that his group is now working across nanobiomaterials and protein engineering to help tackle a quietly massive crisis: soil degradation driven in part by pesticide damage to the soil microbiome. Another project is aimed at the dairy industry. As global milk demand surges, especially in Asia, he argues that dairy is both energetically inefficient and a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. His lab is working on milk without the cow. By inserting dairy protein genes into oilseed safflower plants, he's planning on milking the seeds, as it were, to extract a cream-like product with much higher protein and fat concentrations than conventional milk. But what about the students themselves? What is it like to be a Hebrew University student or newly minted PhD trying to turn a lab discovery into a startup? For our final act, let's follow one such journey. Jasmine Ravid and Daria Feldman met as PhD students at the Hebrew University. Daria was in plant science, researching fungi. Jasmine was studying metabolic engineering in plants. On paper, they were on the traditional academic path, but both had an itch for something more applied. They found themselves in an innovation club, where together they would launch a startup called Kinokutech. Kinokutech's big idea? Transform fungi into a new kind of sustainable food. Essentially, use fungal mycelium, the root-like structures of mushrooms, as a high-protein, meat-like food source. It was a bold concept at the cutting edge of the alternative protein industry.
Basically, I have researched fungi for over a decade before we started Kinoko as part of my PhD and part of my postdoc or some masters, all on the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Faculty of Agriculture. And I had the idea of actually turning all of this knowledge on fungi into the food tech industry. Like, fungi have a lot of advantages in being an alternative meat. So they have a complete protein source. They have this structure that is kind of mimicking the structure of muscles. So they have a lot of those advantages. And at the time that I actually thought about the idea, and even before we founded the company, there were not a lot of companies in this area of having like a mycelium-based, like mycelium will be the structure of the fungi, in this area of food tech or alternative proteins. A lot of them being plant-based or 3D printing, culture-based, but not a lot in this area. I thought this would be like a unique way of bringing this knowledge into this sector.
What is the advantage of fungi in this respect?
So they have a lot of protein relatively. They have this structure that will be a lot like mimicking meat. And so it's nice. They have like, if you look under the microscope, muscle and fungi structure will look alike. It's really hard to differentiate. And they have a great complete protein source. They have all the amino acids, which in some plant-based materials is lacking. So it's really great in that way. They grow quite fast. So it's not like plants, they need months or years. It could be days in some ways. And again, they're known for, like, a lot of people already consume fungi, mushrooms. So it's already a known protein source. It's something that is part of our dietary. And the idea was to take it from here into this kind of area.
How did you get involved, Yasmin?
So we were put together in a team in this innovation club. So they invited people to join who are interested in entrepreneurship and maybe, learning more about startups. And they invited people whether they had an idea or didn't have an idea. So Daria had an idea, I didn't have one. And then they just put us together as a team and we started working together. This is how I got involved into her project.
So why did you go to the Innovations Club if you didn't have an idea?
So it's a funny thing, because when I told my professor in which I was doing my PhD that I was going to this entrepreneurship club, and he looked at me and he said, but what idea do you have for a startup? And I said, like, I have none, but I want to learn more about startups. I want to learn what entrepreneurship is. And I really understood during the 5 years me and Daria have been working together is that, you know, some people have amazing ideas and some people are really good at executing those amazing ideas, and you need those two compartments working together.
With a team formed and the concept in hand, they went through the Hebrew University's 6-month Innovators program, essentially a pre-accelerator for students. There, they learned how to turn a lab idea into a business, how to validate a market need, write a business plan, pitch to investors, and bridge the gap between academic research and consumer product. It wasn't easy. Early on, one challenge was adjusting to the pace and mindset of a startup, which is very different from academia.
I think there's difficulties of, first of all, actually funding a startup, at least for me, and I would think from my perspective and not the companies for a second, is that this is the transition of being a scientist in the academia and being a scientist in a startup, which is completely different mindset. So it's difficulties you need to overcome and learn those skills.
Tell me more.
So when you're focused in academia, I think you're really focused on really understanding the question and trying to answer that in the best possible way. Really be sure what you do. And in the startup, you have to, I wouldn't say gamble, but you have to really quickly understand if you have something in your hand or not. So it's actually quite funny, but I would go and show Jasmine just, I don't know, some really small result I only got once, just nobody really shows that in the academia. And she would use that the next day in talking to investors. So it was like, no, you cannot do that. But you have to change your mindset. This is how it works. It has to be really quickly, really on hand, really put your money where you think it is, a bit of gambling, I would say, but using your own professional intuition, what's needed to be done.
But as they were proving the science, global events took a toll. By 2023, venture capital for food tech had largely dried up.
Basically, money issues. We really had really hard time to raise money due to the industry. The whole industry had a big hit on the fact there is not much enough investors. And being an Israeli company that located in Israel, founded by Israelis, is that it was really hard to raise money after the 7th of October. It was really, really difficult.
After 5 years of effort, Jasmine and Daria made the painful decision to shut down Kinokotech's operations. It wasn't the outcome they dreamed of. But in a final twist, the story has come full circle. The intellectual property, the technology that they had developed, is going back to the Hebrew University's Yisum.
So we started with only an idea, only a very small proof of concept of having so our product was integration between mycelium and plant-based in a fermentation way. So we have this kind of very small proof of concept that we not that tasty, by the way. So we really progressed in taste of really improving that in textural and also really making it really more tasty and more palatable, and people will really like it, but also in a scale up. So we scaled up from a few grams to dozens of grams to kilograms to hundreds of kilograms. After 2 years, we already opened the pilot production facilities that could be operational to produce up to 2 tons of products monthly. So there was a lot of scale up issue we need to overcome with a lot of, I think, different lines of products, not only in alternative proteins, but also in a snacking option. But I don't know, actually the technology itself, it's currently going back to the university. So since we had to shut down operation, the technology will be coming back to Yisum, which is the tech transfer of the Hebrew University.
In other words, the university will hold the intellectual property and perhaps find a new avenue or partner to carry the work forward in the future. Jasmine and Daria, for their part, have moved on, carrying the hard-earned wisdom of the startup adventure. Either way, both founders haven't abandoned the community. They now mentor other students and scientists interested in startups, sharing what they've learned. As Jasmine noted, having a community of like-minded innovators to talk to, especially when things get tough, is incredibly important. That community now exists at the Hebrew University in a way that it simply didn't just a few years ago. Universities have long been factories of knowledge. Now they're trying to cultivate innovation as well. The university can prepare the soil by providing programs, funding and support, but the growth comes from individuals, researchers like Oded Chosayev, who opened his lab to entrepreneurship, or young innovators like Jasmine Ravid and Daria Feldman, who took the leap into the unknown. Not every seed will flourish. Startups are risky, as Kinokotech's trajectory shows. But with each attempt, the ecosystem grows stronger. You've been listening to The View from Mount Scopus. Many thanks to executive producer Tal Kraoz, technical producer Leo Peleg, the Hebrew University's Division for Advancement and External Relations, and its American friends. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. It really does help. And if you know someone who'd love this episode, go ahead and share it with them. Whether this was your first time tuning in, or you've been with us from the start, thank you so much for listening. This episode marks the end of our first season, but we'll be back in the spring with more stories exploring other facets of the Hebrew University. We hope you'll join us again, and until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.